Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition, and this is Midday with Reverend Don. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you're watching on, and they should show up here in my chat room. And today, my stated subject is free will. And if you read the little blurb before the program, you'll notice I did put this in quotation marks because it's not as simple a subject as people like to make it out to be. I also want to take a moment to remark on the fact that we're finding that Restream has been having some issues. And I'm not entirely sure. In fact, I'm checking as we speak whether I'm going out to all the channels I'm supposed to be going out to. And I don't know if I am. But I do see that I'm on several. So, hello. I hope you're having a lovely day. My program yesterday, I don't think got out to nearly every place it was supposed to go because they keep fixing the Restream platform, and every time they seem to make it worse. And, you know, this is something I've often noticed with technology that trying to fix it sometimes has exactly the opposite effect. And as I go forward with this last part of my life, I'm going to be very mindful of that. And certainly avoid fixing things that aren't broken. Restream was not broken. It was a great system until they started fixing it. And now we're having all kinds of little problems. Now, getting back to our subject, free will. In the magical community, everyone wants to talk about the idea that you never interfere with a person's free will, and I talk about this too. But what I would say is that all things being equal, you don't interfere with someone's free will. What do I mean by that? And to show you how complex the subject really is, let's consider some free will situations that you absolutely must interfere with. If someone's free will is to kill you, you should interfere with that. Whether they're robbing your house in a homicidal rage, or whether they are a political party that intends to encompass your demise. And hello to Janet Gann in the chat room. It's good to see you, Janet. You certainly want to interfere with that free will. If a person's free will is to rape someone, of course you interfere with that free will. It's completely appropriate to interfere in that kind of free will. This is not what we mean when we say, do not interfere in people's free will. If we're talking about a 3-year-old and their free will is to run and play in the middle of a crowded street, of course you stop them. And these things should be no-brainers. But I've met people who want to take this idea to extremes it's not really meant to cover. When we talk about not interfering with people's free will, we're talking about things that are their decision. Whether they kill or harm you is not properly their decision. And of course you would defend yourself or another person. And yes, that interferes with the would-be wrongdoer's free will, and so be it. And hello to Janet Winston in the chat room. It's good to see you. I guess I am on all the channels today, because I'm seeing the familiar names. I don't think this should be a wide stretch of the imagination for anyone, but I've met people who took such a passive relationship with this concept that it would be. A very close friend of mine once said that if they, whoever they might be, were beating down their door with the intention of killing them, they would not fight back because they were nonviolent and did not want to interfere with that other person's free will. I was horrified by this, and I was at that time early 20s at the oldest. And while I agreed that as an individual, the person who was speaking had the right to make that sacrifice for themselves. But what if you're not only responsible for yourself? What if you have children? Of course, you must protect your children in a situation like that. And that would be interfering with the free will of the evildoer who wants to cause them harm. Of course, you do that. That is not what we mean by do not interfere in someone's free will. What we mean when we say don't interfere in someone's free will um, is that, well, to use the whole phrase, you do as you will so long as it harms none. But if it's doing harm, of course you oppose it. If it's not doing harm, well, that's their business. Um, Now, there are multiple takes on this, and the maxim I've just said, do as you will, but harm none, is hundreds of years old. It comes out of Rabelais. There is no question it is hundreds of years old, and very well known throughout that entire time. Although the part that came out of Rabelais was simply do as you will. The harm none is a more recent addition. And the reason is that people misunderstood how to apply the concept. When we say do as you will, the general opinion that I would subscribe to is the ceremonial opinion, who are the people who I believe have reverenced this concept longest, which is that the term will is not the same as want. When we say do as you will, we don't mean do whatever you want to do. Will in this case is your true will, your soul's purpose in life. You want to follow your soul's purpose in life. That is not the same as doing everything you want in every moment. And I think that to truly understand the concept, you must be familiar with this understanding, particularly the Rabelaisian form of simply do as you will. Harm none is an obvious corollary to it. How old that is debatable, but it's kind of implied in the original. And part of the idea also was that, left to their own devices, people are basically good. And for the most part, I agree with that, but not always. And I think that we only need to look around the world today to see that there are people who are not good. We also have to admit that the people I would judge as being not good think they are, and would quite possibly regard me as being someone who is not good. And this is why, I've all through my career made an issue of the idea that in the Wiccan religion we don't have the idea of quote evil end quote, and this is why, because there is no universal definition that would apply to it. It's whatever the person speaking does not like. There are some people in the world today I would, in a colloquial sense, call evil. But I'm very much aware that they would not share that point of view. And which of us is right, I don't know, that we can existentially know that from here in this earthly dimension. But I do believe there are things that within our social contract are good or bad. And that brings us back to our evildoers whose free will should not be allowed to reign. If your free will is to rape or murder, of course it must be constrained, and society is completely right to do that. I am 100% in support of laws in society that prevent these acts, even knowing that there are always problems to bear in mind with that. And hello to Dog in the chat room, DOG. And Dog says, the golden rule can take quite the turn. Great dragon it is. And yes, absolutely. It's very interesting to see how people define what is good and often come out to be very bad. And I think anyone can fall into that trap. And we need to remember that. And when we talk about free will, this is part of that conversation too. Um, but so often I have heard people insist without deeper thought that we must never interfere in a person's free will. And that simply is not so, in my opinion. Now, again, all things being equal, of course you don't. And this, in my mind, um, the Wiccan read, do as you will but harm none, is something that all of our mothers should have taught us before sending us to kindergarten. That go ahead and have fun and do the things you like, but don't hurt anybody. That's not a huge stretch of the imagination, I don't think. And yet, there are people who insist you can't possibly live that way. There are people who try to apply it to accidentally killing microbes. Hello to Reverend Michael in the chat room. It's good to see you. It's been so long. I mean, I last saw you, last night? It's good to see you again. A happy alien costume on upcoming festival. And Magical Mermaid. Hello, Magical Mermaid. It's good to see you. Magical Mermaid says, give me freedom, even though it's definitely not free. Absolutely. There's so many things to say about this, but the first one I wanted to say is that, yeah, if someone is doing bad things, then yes, you should interfere in their free will. But the problem, of course, is what is bad. And I think that there are certain things that any reasonable person would agree are bad acts that should be interfered with. I've mentioned rape and murder, because I think everyone will agree with that. And then there are many others that are a matter of opinion, and that would be too long a conversation for this program. And that brings us back to what exactly do we mean by good and bad, or those who insist on the phrase good and evil. Many things we consider good today were considered evil only a few generations ago, and even still today by some groups. Things like gender equality, which I consider absolutely necessary and totally right. Some people historically considered a great evil, and some people today still think that way. Minority rights, which I consider an absolute necessity, there are people who do not feel that way. And this is part of what makes morality such a deep conversation. And to some extent, we must all decide for ourselves what is good or bad, and hopefully still staying within society's general requirements. But there is no absolute. Slavery, most Americans would agree, at least I would hope, was a terrible evil. But a couple of hundred years ago, there were lots of people who were saying otherwise and would never have accepted that point of view. And unfortunately, there seem to still be a few that way. Our ideas change. Our understandings change. But I would say, if someone's free will is to go out and enslave someone, they should be interfered with. They don't have a right to that free will, in my point of view. And I'm not talking about things like BDSM relationships. That's consensual. I'm talking about actual forced slavery. And we all know it's still active in the world, and we all know there are groups trying to bring it back. And we must interfere with them. Their free will is not appropriate. So when we talk about not interfering with free will, we're speaking relatively, and I think the phrase all things being equal, or where appropriate, is very, very essential to understanding this issue. Now, there is another part of this It's also worth discussing. And that is the question, well, just how free is our will? We all know that in a certain situation we can make one decision or another, but do we always have the ability to do whatever it is we might want? Do we always have the capability of knowing what we might want? Um, Many hundreds of years ago, Plutarch was writing about the oracles of Delphi and how, because it was a very arduous position, which actually tended to shorten the life of the oracle, educated women were no longer willing to take the role during his lifetime. The result was the oracles that he served with as a priest of Delphi did not have the same skill in bringing through oracular messages as their predecessors had, because they didn't have as much knowledge of the world. And when I talk about clairvoyance and oracular work, I always point out the wider your frame of reference, the better you will be at bringing through messages, because if you cannot conceive it, it cannot come through you. The oracles of Plutarch's day, while they had the free will to be oracles, could not exceed the limitations of their training. They could only do what they could do. All the free will in the world would not allow them to imagine what they could not conceive. Certain things always limit us, and some of them are things we would never think of. Another example, I'm wearing my black dragon ring today, and I was going to wear this one also, my black hematite ring. However, the only finger it will fit on is where the dragon is. No amount of free will is going to make it fit properly on this finger. It only goes that far. It's not something that free will is going to affect. Now, high-level manifestation, maybe. But just free will, it doesn't matter what I want. It won't do it. It's not meant for it. On the other hand, manifestation can sometimes affect things that you don't expect. For example, the black dragon ring last year would only fit on this finger. This year it fits here. Maybe that's partly manifestation. Mostly it's weight loss. But either way, there are ways to make changes, but not to everything. This is also true in the world around us. I might like to see certain forces active in society. And there are things that I can do within the reference of my free will to promote these and to advance them. But short of high-level manifestation, which can do amazing things, but short of that, I don't have the free will to simply make it so. It takes time and effort and work. Now, I will say, high-level manifestation can do amazing things so amazing that they can unravel your understanding of reality. That's a different program. But generally speaking, our possibilities for free will are constrained by many things, and even what we desire is shaped by the society we live in, and not entirely free will. Unless we go back to that statement and that attitude that our free will, our will itself, is our soul's purpose, which changes a little bit our understanding. I do believe that we can always follow our soul's purpose, and the more in touch we are with our higher self and the powers of our soul, the more we can manifest that in this world. But that's not usually what we mean by this. Now, Magical Mermaid says, our lives seem to be a fight for identity, community, and self-ownership. Yes, I think that actually is a good way to describe much of the purpose of creation and of this world. Because if you look not only at ourselves, but every organism life itself seems to be about, maybe identity isn't quite the right word, but what you are, what you're becoming, sometimes what you have been, and about self-ownership and being the best that you can be in that situation. And I kind of believe that that is why the divine created this world. This is the world of transformation. This is the world of self-realization. And I believe it was created largely for those purposes. And Magical Mermaid also says humans must help transform our universe. I believe that totally also. That we must be the change we wish to see, if in fact we wish to see it. And as we come up to the upcoming election, this is especially true. We must, without advocating any particular point of view, whatever point of view we subscribe to, we must make ourselves heard, and we must stand up for what we believe in, because the choices are in diametric opposition. And, it's not something, particularly for a minority community like our own, to simply sit by and watch. We need to take our stand in the voting booth. Now, depending how all of that goes, we may need to take other stands. And really, we always do in every day of our life, because whether we're taking public stands or not, our behavior and the things we do are our stand for what we consider right. And when we talk about free will, what we consider right for our own free will is vitally important to be aware of and stand up for. And I hope that whatever your point of view, that is what you do in your life. It's what I've tried to do in mine. I'm human like everyone else, and like everyone, I've occasionally made the wrong move. I've occasionally misunderstood situations or people. We all do this. But I've always tried to do the right thing. And last year, and it's interesting because my day started thinking about things from last year, because last night ended that way. But last year there was a point where I felt attacked from every side, because I was being attacked from many sides. And the statement I made on this very program was that I hoped that in the end, the way that I had lived my life would establish the sort of person that I was for people, that they would be able to look and see. And a year later, that's certainly what it seems to me happened. And I think that will happen for you too. Be the change you want to see. Do what you think is right, and people will see this. And there may be other people who will lie about you, because people do, who may say false things about you for their own purposes. But if you have lived a good life, I think this will always show, and people will see the truth, maybe not immediately, but eventually. And I've found that to be the case throughout this life, and I hope that you do also. Now, I see that it's time for a message from our sponsors. And why do we go to a message from our sponsor? Because we love our sponsor. And we want to thank our sponsors for being our sponsors. And here we go. Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Rev Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life.
Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours.
And we want to thank our sponsors, Equinox Learning Hub and me, Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, and I'm currently putting together a really big one. And I'll be saying more about that in future. But we're coming to the end of the Samhain season. Thursday will be October 31st, the beginning of Samhain. And on Samhain Day, November 1st, I'm going to have a little more to say about that. But we're coming also into the Yule season next. And people are going to be looking for Yule presents, and we have them. And so I hope you'll join us for our auctions. And hello to Timothy Gallagher in the chat room. It's good to see you, Timothy, who says fun things about auctions. Yes, they are. And we have unusual items, and we're just getting more unusual. So I hope you will join us for that. And again, thank you to our sponsors, to Equinox Learning Hub. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us today, and a few last words about free will. Free will is not a simple concept. The Wiccan Rede, do as you will but harm none, is not a simple concept. And, in my first degree writing, I made the statement, which I stand by, that the term harm in do as you will but harm none must be understood in its quite literal traditional meaning and not elaborated upon. And if you understand it that way, it's a valuable guide to life. If you try to expand it to ridiculous terms, it becomes useless. I've heard people talk about the Wiccan Rede as if it had to do with killing invisible microbes that we accidentally breathe in or what have you. And that was never meant for anything like that. It was meant to basically say when you're going to school and you're out in you're out at recess, don't hit the other kids over the head. You know better. And Timothy says, free will sometimes is about making a choice decision. Yes, absolutely. And again, we don't always have every choice. And our background, our education, our culture don't always even allow us to conceive of every choice. And I will say, I come from a broad background, but there have been many times in life where other people, especially the pagan, have helped me to see options that were not immediately obvious to me because they looked at things differently than I did. And I think it's very important in life to surround yourself with people who see things differently than you, because you're not always going to see everything. And no matter how broad your background, there's always more. There are always things you might not have thought of. There are always things that are not part of your training, but might be part of someone else's. And this is important. And Timothy says, remember, humans only have 2 arms, not like other animals. This is true, usually. A few humans have had more than 2, but that was usually a heck of a conversation starter. With that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour, and I want to recommend to you that you follow your free will. And by that, I mean your soul's purpose, and that you embody your highest soul's purpose in this life. And I think you'll find that everything else will flow. With that, let us close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do with us in our lives. We rejoice in this walk we walk together, and we ask you to help us to see all of our options and to make the best and most practical decisions for our highest soul's purposes. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love Knowing you are always with us from respect, we thank you for your presence. May you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always. And I'll be back tomorrow. And normally on Wednesdays, my guest is Chris Copeland. Tomorrow, however, I'm going to have a different guest, or at least that's the plan, one of our Grellian Publishing authors, whose book is due to premiere this week. I'd tell you who, but I haven't gotten the absolute confirmation yet. But either way, it'll be a great program. And then on Thursday, I will be talking topically enough about the Selwyn Sabbat and what it means, and perhaps a bit about Beltane as well, because of course, depending where you are in the world, it's the same day. Or the opposite. And isn't that so often true for the most important things in life? And with that,